Gang Stalking, Perp Mentality and the Reptilian Brain, by Anthony Forwood. 3 signs that identify the perp mentality. 1. Takes pleasure in another person's misfortune. 2. Is unable to logically explain his her beliefs. 3. Resorts to the intimidation of physical violence to resolve issues. These 3 signs, by themselves, should allow you to easily identify who the antagonists are in this covered program that TIs are involuntarily immersed in. A possible 4th sign is the need to belong to a group, which is based on their lower intelligence level and their inability to express free will in a positive way. They require the group for security and assurance, using it as a means to guide their beliefs and motivations. This is a beehive mentality, where a very small core dominates and controls the entire group. These groups might be either formal or informal, but in either case, the member has a very strong attachment to it, and although individual members may come and go over time, any one of them with a perp mentality will always remain more loyal to the group itself and what it represents than they will to other individual members. However, not everyone who has a perp mentality will belong to a group, but instead will be very much a loner, and they are easy to distinguish by their constant negative attitude and general dissatisfaction with life. These types basically rely on beliefs and habits that were set earlier in life, which they cling to strongly. These beliefs and habits will still be associated with a certain group, but in these particular cases, that group is usually outside of the person's ability to physically connect with for one reason or another, although they once were connected or have always wanted to be. Some examples of this are the wannabe biker, the wannabe commando, the discharged soldier, and the overzealous religious fundamentalist. These people will generally spend a great deal of time with activities that remind them of the group they see themselves as being a part of, and they will surround themselves with things that remind them of it. They often identify with movie characters who exhibit the traits they admire. Examples of this perp mentality can be found among Christians, corporate employees, members of ethnic groups, families, street gang members, members of political parties, members of school fraternities, members of special cause groups, and perhaps worst of all, members of secret societies. Correlations between the reptilian brain and perp mentality. There is a distinct correlation between the reptilian brain and the thinking processes that perp mentalities rely on. This is important to consider. As humans, we can function from any one of these 3 primary stages of the brain: the reptilian complex, the paleomammalian complex, and the neocortex or neomammalian complex. The reptilian brain, based on instinctive drives and lacking the functions of emotion or reasoning, operates strictly on a black and white understanding of things. This means that they see things only in extremes, rather than by variations of degree. We normally only resort to using this part of the brain when we're under extreme trauma and duress, and our immediate survival is threatened. At these times, the signals from this part of the brain drown out the signals from the higher brain functions because of its closer proximity to the brainstem and the central nervous system, through which all brain responses are carried to the rest of the body. Perps, psychopaths, and general assholes in society are mainly operating through this part of the brain. Perps, given the uniformly organized, top-down structure of their group, are in a position to be continually triggered to operate through their more primitive reptilian brain, which can be done using fairly simple fear-based psychological methods to bypass the higher brain functions that involve the higher emotions and intelligence. Being always tied closely to their leaders or handlers, whether directly or indirectly through the group, they are easily fed triggers to elicit the lower brain functions that will dictate how they should react. When these lower brain functions are triggered, the person is operating outside of any emotional or intellectual capacity, and only knows 1 or 2 possible responses to a given situation. It's only when the trigger wears off over time and the higher brain functions are given a chance to operate that the person might begin to wake up and begin to apply those higher brain functions in a more appropriate way. But whether they learn to apply them appropriately often depends on relearning how to perceive both themselves and the world around them in a more accurate light. We see and hear a lot about the extreme injustices that are done to our fellow TIs, and which are being done to ourselves, and many have wondered what this is all about, where it's all going. If you consider for a moment what I've just said, you might begin to make the connection. Extremely traumatic situations or situations that threaten our survival triggers the reptilian brain functions to take over, and once they're triggered, with regularly spaced smaller triggers they will continue to operate. and take over the thinking processes to a greater and greater degree. The ultimate result is that we eventually give in completely to these lower brain functions and take on the beehive mentality that governs the reptilian mindset. When this begins to occur, we stop acting on any emotions other than fear, and we stop applying our higher intellect to solve our problems. The higher brain functions are overruled by our more primitive instinctive nature. It becomes a fight or flight, kill or be killed situation. As far as our deeper drives go, our higher emotions are shut down and our reasoning becomes distorted. We begin to think in terms that are easy for others to manipulate. The people who ultimately set up and orchestrate gang stalking groups are very aware of these primitive reptilian brain functions. It's what they use to govern the thinking of those they control and to motivate them into action. These people at the top are the core of the beehive group, retaining all the power and dictating to those beneath them, who follow blindly. The power factor. In the context of all this, the other side of fear is power. Fear motivates people to act through their reptilian instinctive functions, and power is the only reward recognized when those functions are in control. Thus, power becomes the end goal of those who are driven by fear to act out against others. In terms of gang stalking, power is first taken away from the perps by their controllers through fear, and then returned by way of their actions against their targets. When a person is reduced to thinking and acting through the reptilian brain, they are disempowered by the loss of the higher brain functions. This loss may not even be recognized, however, and they may still feel that they are thinking and acting of their own free will within the bounds of reason and are feeling with their emotions. And yet, something will still seem amiss, so they will seek other ways to replace what was lost. This results in what is common among all reptilian species, a hierarchical system of domination over others. The controllers at the top dominate the perps, and the perps find release by dominating their targets. The targets, pushed to the point of operating through their reptilian brain functions, and having no one to dominate, feel helpless. If the target continues to live in a state of fear for long enough, they will eventually give in and seek empowerment through similar acts against others. The indigo factor. These indigo children, or the otherwise highly intelligent members of society who fit their description, are the vanguards to the new age that people are talking about. You might think that all this new age talk is a load of misguided spiritual nonsense. Much of it is, but all the signs are there that were predicted millennia ago. And one of these predictions was that those who would survive into the new age would be those people who were more highly developed. This places our perps in a dangerous position, but one that they are blind to. On the other hand, those who are more highly developed and who would lead the rest into a new world were predicted to bear the greatest suffering in the early stages of these changes. This is what is happening now. We, as TIs, are seeing the reality of this current age and what it has culminated in: utter evil and oppression. This is something that others don't see very clearly because they are caught up in the reptilian functioning of their brains, unable to feel the incredible emotions that we do or to understand things as deeply as we do, and therefore unable to comprehend the extent of the evil and oppression that to us is quite obvious. Those in power, those who control and manipulate everyone else from the top, have only one fear: us. This is why they seek to destroy our lives, and to isolate us and torment us and belittle us and turn everyone else against us. Although they control and manipulate others through these reptilian brain functions and operate through them as well, they are still capable of using their intellectual functions because they aren't subjected to the same degree of fear that they subject others to. But still, they are not as intelligent as they seem. They rely on the intelligence of many others who they have ensnared in their net, others who are not aware of what side they really work for. If you can begin to understand your own mind, how it operates and how to redirect fear into goals that require higher brain functions, you can subvert any attempts to draw you into the net that will be your undoing. When you feel the fear, take note of which part of your brain you are operating from, and work your way back up to the higher brain functions. Review the 3 identifying characteristics of the perp mentality and avoid acting through them. The purpose of all that is going on is to eliminate any possibility of a better world for anyone but those at the top. A beehive mentality is necessary for this to occur. The lines are being drawn, and those of us who are best fit to carry over into a better world are waking up to this opportunity. Those at the top knew long ago that this would occur, and they fear us more than we realize.